Welcome to the third Sunday of Advent. We are halfway to Christmas. My family and I have been working on our Advent calendar. It's about half full of ornaments now. Sure. Cool. Our Advent calendar looks like a Christmas tree, and that's a timeless tradition that we are going to look at this week. The Christmas tree. How many of you have a Christmas tree in your house? I bet most of you do. Christmas trees are really fun, and most families in America have one. But do they really have anything to do with the real meaning of Christmas? With God sending Christ as a baby? Well, not always, but they can. Even before Jesus was born, people would sometimes use branches from evergreen trees, like this one, to decorate their homes and buildings during the winter. Think about it as special as what is special about an evergreen tree? It is evergreen. It stays green all winter. When everything is cold and dark and most plants have lost their leaves, evergreen trees and branches are a symbol that the world is still alive, and the spring will bring warmth and new life. As Christians, we know that all life comes from God through Jesus Christ. And Christians have used evergreen trees as a way of remembering that. Hundreds of years ago, Christian people in Germany began to bring not just branches but whole trees into their houses during the Christmas season as a way to remember God sending baby Jesus at Christmas. Sometimes now people forget about that part and they just put up a tree for a decoration or to make their house look fancy. If we don't pay attention to the real meaning of Christmas and worry too much about trying to make our tree or our house fancy, it can even become an idol, something that makes us forget about God, not remember Him. But if we do pay attention, our Christmas tree can help remind us that, like an evergreen tree, God is always alive and will always be with us. The decorations that we put on our trees can remind us of God too. A lot of times, the top of our tree might have an angel, like the angels who spoke to Mary, Joseph, and the shepherds, or sometimes they have a star to help us remember the special star that was over the stable in Bethlehem. The Bible verse that we have for our materials this week reminds us that just like the evergreen, God is with us through the cold and dark of every winter, unlike idols and things of this world. He never leaves us. The verse is from Hosea 14:8. What have I to do with idols? It is I who answers and look after you. I am like an evergreen tree. Your faithfulness comes from me. Now, let's hear from some of our friends at First Presbyterian about their Christmas traditions.
Good morning. One of the traditions in the Callahan household is decorating our Christmas tree, as I'm sure it probably is at your house too. But one of the first things that we put up on our Christmas tree, and we put it right up in the middle, is baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph, the wise men, the sheep, the donkey, because that reminds us what Christmas is really about. And that helps us to keep the focus on that as we celebrate the things at Christmas. But one of our other traditions is buying an ornament on most of our vacations or the trips that we go on. And that helps us to remember things as we decorate the tree. We can talk about the fun that we had on some of those vacations. For example, one of my favorites is this beaded elephant. We bought him in Botswana, Africa, when we were on a safari. And he just reminds us of all the really neat animals that we saw on that trip. Another one is this ornament from Japan. It's a little girl, and she reminds us of all the really interesting things that we saw there and the very interesting things we had to eat. Another one is this cable car from San Francisco. I can remember hanging on for dear life as we went up and down those steep hills. One of my favorites, too, is this Mickey Mouse from Disney World. It reminds me of the great time that we had with our family when we were there a few years ago. And in this season, looking back on the fun times that we had helps to bring some happiness to this season. And we can also look ahead to the things that we're going to be able to do after this COVID is all over again. But having Jesus center on our tree helps us to remember that the real meaning of Christmas is that Christ came to earth. And if we focus on that, that's going to bring us the most happiness of all.
Now we light the Advent candle. The time is drawing near. We wait and we prepare for Christ's coming.
Sometimes the world gives us false hopes, only to leave us disappointed and empty. When we see a Christmas tree, help us remember that, like an evergreen, God is always alive and always with us.
Advent is a time to trust in God's promise. Today we light the third candle, the joy candle, celebrating joy that Christ brings. When we see a Christmas tree with a star or angel on top, help us remember that joy.
Please join me in prayer. God, help us to trust in you and know that even when a situation seems hopeless, there is always hope in you. Help us during Advent and always to live in the joy that only you can bring. Amen.
Since our timeless tradition today was the tradition of the Christmas tree, our song today is What Else, O Christmas Tree?
Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Not only green, but summer's here, but also winter's cold and drear. Oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Oh Christmas tree, much pleasure thou canst give me. Oh Christmas tree, much pleasure thou canst give me. How often has the Christmas tree afforded me the greatest glee? Oh Christmas tree, much pleasure thou canst give me. Oh Christmas tree, thy candle shines so brightly. Oh Christmas tree, thy candle shines so brightly. From base to summit, gay and bright, there's only splendor for the sight. Oh Christmas tree, thy candle shines so brightly. Oh Christmas tree, how richly God has decked thee. Oh Christmas tree, how richly God has decked thee. Thou bidst us true and faithful be, and trust in God unchangingly. Oh Christmas tree, how richly God has decked thee.
Now we'd like to invite you to do a craft that will help you remember the tradition of the Christmas tree. Supplies for the craft are in your materials. Right? You're looking for a small bag with a stick and several small ribbon. Instructions for your craft are also in your materials, marked Week 3 Ribbon Tree Craft. You also have a sheet marked Week 3, the tradition of the Christmas tree reflection questions. We encourage you to talk about these with your friends and family, or just think through them on your own. Before you turn to the craft and questions, please join us in a closing prayer. Dear God, thank you for this third week of Advent. Remind us this week that Advent is a time of joy. Even when we experience challenges in our world, help us remember that joy comes in the morning, and it comes only from you. Amen. Well, thank you. Enjoy your craft and reflection questions, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.